Well, let's talk now to a former Iranian diplomat, Mehrdad Konsari, who was in the London embassy of Iran at the time of the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Thank you for being with us on the news channel. What do you make of today's moves?
Well, I think it was, first of all, it was an expected move. Talks for opening up the embassy in Tehran and London have been going on for more than a year. I don't think anybody expected it to happen so quickly, but in the aftermath of the nuclear agreement, I think it was pushed forward, perhaps, given the fact that many European countries are now trying to enhance their ties with Tehran, especially for economic reasons.
I can imagine there's a bit of a kind of almost a stampede to get back into Iran and do business.
Well, Iran is the largest untouched economic market in the world today. And if things do open up, and the possibilities are that they could, then obviously there's a great deal of interest on the part of Britain to want to get involved as well. But I don't want to say that that is the most important factor, because especially for Britain, Britain has a great deal of economic interest in the region, especially in the Persian Gulf area, and stability in the Persian Gulf is a key factor, and of course Iran has a great role to play in that.
Relations have been warm and cold over the last 36 odd years. I mean, we had the Salman Rushdie affair, which was particularly down point. We then had restoration of relations in the 90s. Then, of course, we had the embassy being stormed 4 years ago, which led to the most recent closure. We still don't have an agreement for there to be an ambassador there. I mean, are relations as good as perhaps the Foreign Secretary would give us to believe?
I think, you know, there are mutual suspicions continue to remain, but the format for improving things, you know, the restriction of the fact that relations cannot be restored at this stage at ambassadorial level is because of action taken by the Iranian parliament to denigrate relations to the chargé level. But now, you see, what has happened in the course of the last 36 years is that as we have moved on and as we have moved into the present times, the ideological factors motivating Iranian behavior has simmered down. And especially since the removal of Ahmadinejad, which has been a most fortuitous event for the people of Iran, and the advent of President Rouhani, things have gone on, you know, have started expanding in a completely different direction.
But you know what the skeptics say in the West? They say, hang on a minute, it's all very well to say President Rouhani is the new smiling, engaging, you know, internationally appealing face of the Iranian regime, but he is not the ultimate power in Iran. That remains with the supreme leader. There are other forces like the Iranian Guard and so on, and that therefore, in a country with so many potential loci of power, it's optimistic, to say the least, to think that if you have one good man in the job of president for a short period, everything has changed.
Well, you see, you know, we went through that experience when President Khatami came. And of course, the supreme leader at that time went in a completely different direction. But the supreme leader in the country had many more options at that time. We have seen the same supreme leader who stood next to Ahmadinejad in 2009 move completely away and essentially sanction the nuclear agreement that we have reached. That nuclear agreement could not have been reached minus the support of the supreme leader. So what you have to bear in mind is that there has been a major shift in his, you know, position. And that shift is primarily due to the fact of changing circumstances for Iran. The fact is that the regime cannot continue to maintain control and stability within the country unless it moves in a different direction. And restoring ties with Britain ties in with that overall picture of trying to move in a completely different direction to save the country.
Do they ultimately trust Britain, though? I mean, you know, we know enough about the history of relations between our two countries. We know about oil having been effectively controlled by the British since back in, 1913. We know about Britain's role in the coup against Prime Minister Mossadegh. We know the suspicions that Britain was propping up the Shah at a particularly difficult time at the end of the 70s when he was accused of all kinds of human rights abuses. I mean, that history hasn't just disappeared.
No. That you know, trust is one of those things that, you know, and wanting to remain distrustful sometimes becomes a habit rather than anything else. And that will remain. But at the same time, where there has been distrust, there has also been great affinity. and there is a great desire on the part of people to want to come to Britain, to have exchanges with Britain, cultural exchange, economic exchange. These things have always moved in a completely different direction than the political discourse and the differences that have existed in those areas. So setting up the British consulate, for example, in Tehran, which they have not set up at this stage, is something that the Iranian people are looking forward to, because they would like to come and visit Britain and so on and so forth, and they don't want to go to third countries to get a visa. So I think the distrust factor will continue to remain. That's not something, that's a psychological thing more than anything else. But I think the government in Iran is definitely looking for ways of trying to enhance ties and to essentially diffuse many areas of contention, especially for diffusing Shia-Sunni tensions in the region, the fight against ISIS. These are things which they have in common with Britain, and where Britain, for example, may sort of have difficulties with some of its traditional allies.
I was going to say traditional allies like Israel, who were only a few days ago accusing of Iran of being behind the rocket attack which took place. We have, of course, Saudi Arabia, we know, very nervous about any suggestion of Iran having growing influence in the region, and presumably worried about a warming of relations with Britain and the United States.
But you have to bear in mind that Iran is a regional superpower and will always remain a regional superpower. How it behaves as a regional superpower is the thing, and I think this kind of relationship promotes Iran to want to go to advance its policies and its legitimate interests. And its legitimate interests sometimes may not be liked by other people, but they are legitimate nonetheless. But through dialogue and diplomacy, I think that air of understanding could help promote things and make things go a long way.